All right, if our panelists will unmute themselves and we'll get the video started. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and we'll welcome everyone today to our program. So today we have a few folks in to talk about PPP and Eidl. Liz Bennett's going to introduce them. Lori Street and Tom Greinke are going to join us. So with that being said, it looks like everybody's audio and video is on. And actually, I'm going to ask one of our panelists to unmute. And then Liz, if you want to take it over, we are officially underway.
Great, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Once again, thank you to Bill and Debbie for helping so much with this program and putting some great stuff together. We couldn't do it without you also. Really appreciate you guys. We're happy to welcome Tom and Lori today to talk about and just make sure that your business is taking advantage of all the loan programs that are out there. It's kind of hard to understand some of that and the forgiveness and all that. So they're going to touch on that a lot more in depth than I could, and I'll let them do that. I do want to mention that I think I mentioned it maybe last time, that our Salute Small Business Awards program is now live for applications and nominations. So if you know a great business that you would like to nominate, or if your business would like to apply, the rules and categories are online for that. And I will share that in the chat shortly so you all can click on that and check it out. So we'd love to have you apply. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bill and Debbie and Lori and Tom. Thank you all.
Thanks, Liz.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it. Once again, welcome to our now bi-weekly 4 o'clock focus. Really appreciate everybody joining us again. And when Bill and I meet to discuss these topics and who we want to have on, we both just felt like there was really been a lack of a focus on financial, and those are just such important issues for all of us now as small business owners. So we turned to local experts, Tom and Lori, to help us out here this afternoon. A lot of the things that we hear on the news change fairly regularly with regard to some of these programs, so we thought some clarification would help. Tom comes to us from Bank of the Bluegrass and has been involved in banking for over 20 years in Lexington, holds his MBA from the University of Kentucky. And Lori Santos is the owner of B2B CFO, sorry, Lori. And so she comes to us with over 25 years of financing and accounting experience. We had a few questions that were pre-submitted from, attendees, regular attendees to the 4 o'clock focus. So I think we're going to kind of kick off with something that we, just kind of a general overview. And I think, Tom, if you can maybe kick us off by telling us a little bit about what has changed from the original PPP loan to the loan that, how it exists in its current form.
Absolutely. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all this afternoon. And I guess I'd preface everything by stating that what we're going to speak about today is in effect today. The rules of this program, as many of you all know, have changed dramatically over the course of the program. There's been iterative changes related to the interim final rule weekly for a number of weeks. And so everything that Lori and I talk about today, again, I would just preface the entire meeting by stating that it's really subject to change, and keeping up with the rules and the changes is our job to help you understand them as a consumer. But what has changed from the original program to today? I think the biggest pieces, the biggest changes, one of which is the split between the payroll expenses that are eligible for forgiveness and the other expenses, if you will. So as most folks know, the original program came out with a 75-25 split. 75% of the money had to be used for payroll expenses, which could be payroll itself, healthcare related expenses, as far as premiums and that sort of thing, and retirement expenses. They changed that rule to 60-40. So presently, a minimum of 60% of your PPP funds have to be used for payroll related expenses in order to qualify for forgiveness. That's one of the biggest changes. The second biggest change was the change to the covered period. So there's two terms, and you'll hear them throughout this presentation. There's a reference period and there's a covered period. Without going into detail on those two different periods today, the covered period is the period during which you use the funds. So initially, customers had 8 weeks to use the money. That was the covered period. in the iterative change that came out and in the most recent interim final rule, which is what the SBA and Treasury call it, they changed that period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. So customers were granted up to, I should say, 24 weeks, where customers were granted up to 24 weeks to spend all of their PPP money, as opposed to having to spend it all within an 8-week period of time. So it really extended the ability of customers to continue to use the PPP funds for payroll and those other expenses. Also, I wanted to point out that a couple of other changes. One, after June 5th, the PPP loans, which were originally 2-year loans, are now 5-year loans, as opposed to a 2-year note. So in terms of the maturity of the note itself, it's a 5-year note as opposed to a 2-year. And then the form itself, the forgiveness form, they came out with another change on the forgiveness form. As opposed to just offering customers the 3508 form, there's now the 3508 EZ form, which is basically the form for independent contractors, sole proprietorships, people who typically file a Schedule C on their tax return. That's who that form is going to be used for, and or businesses who experienced little or no change during the covered period from the reference period in terms of salary expense and or FTE. And again, we'll talk about all of that, but no change means you didn't reduce anyone's salary by more than 25%, and you didn't reduce your FTE during the period. So for instance, if you were in a business that was considered essential, you probably didn't necessarily reduce your FTE if it was really business as usual for you. And those clients, again, didn't reduce salary or FTE, full-time employees. Those businesses may be eligible to use the 3508 EZ form as opposed to the long form, the standard 3508. But I'd say those were the biggest changes from kind of the outset of the program until today.
And if you applied for the loan prior to when those changes were announced, do you still, like if you were one of the early recipients, do you just have the 8 weeks?
No.
No, so it changed for everybody that applied.
Correct. Yes, you have up to 24 weeks. And Lori and I have talked about this. It's really important to recognize that it's not just 8 or 24. So if you use all of your funds after 10 weeks or 12 weeks or 14 weeks, and you have what you need to apply for forgiveness, you can go ahead and do so. You don't have to wait for the 24-week period to expire. But yes, anyone who received a PPP loan, it's basically been extended to that 24-week covered period.
Okay, perfect. Very helpful.
Yeah,
So
let me just
ahead,
real quick, because actually, Tom, correct me, but you have to, it's assumed 24 and you can elect 8 now.
Correct.
So you kind of have to, they've already, 24 is or whatever that 24-week option is that, or you have to elect to actually file for just the 8-week period.
Right.
I mean, you could use your funds, on week 9 and be done.
okay.
And are there, I mean, they're going to last a certain period of time. Are companies allowed to reapply for additional funds as well?
Yeah, we'll cover that.
Okay, I was going to say, I think there are probably a lot of people curious about that, just as much as individual employees are thinking about, whether unemployment's changing and things like that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'll be patient. Sorry.
Well, no. So just going into that, there are funds that are still available. So it's important to know, it's a couple dates. PPP funds are available. You can still apply through August 8th. That's a key date. Okay, so August 8th, there's still accepting applications. So there's still money there in the big ball of the billions that they put behind this. And so I think essentially it's till the money runs out.
Okay.
And then, some of the things that you should ask yourself when you're looking at that funding and if you should get PPP, obviously if you already got it, you can't get it again. So that's not an option. It's for those that already haven't applied for it. But you need to ask yourself, do I need these funds? How am I going to spend these funds? The whole point of these is to save jobs, right? Mm-hmm. The idea is if you save you really can't afford your employees, but you're going to keep them on. that's the whole point of protecting the payroll and employee jobs, so you're not going through unemployment. You're not sending your employees through unemployment. So it's really important, I think, at this point, now that we have the forgiveness forms and some information on forgiveness, that you look at that forgiveness application and see if you'll meet the criteria really before you apply. Tom, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's right on. And ultimately you've got through August 8th. If you have not applied for PPP, there is money available in the program. But that said, I will say that a number of financial institutions, some of which never offered it in the beginning anyway, some of which, once the program shifted from a 2-year note to a 5-year note, they pretty much ended their program. They ended their participation in the program. So it may not be quite as easy to find a financial institution that's willing to extend PPP at this time. I think at the outset, at least from a community banking standpoint, we wanted to extend to the community in terms of making sure people still were getting paid, people that where businesses may be struggling, to make sure that the intent of the program, which was to keep payrolls operating and keep employees employed, that we were doing our part as good stewards of that. And again, I think most of the community banks in Lexington did that. And I'm really proud of the community banking industry as a whole, and especially in Lexington, for doing that. But again, I will say now that the program has changed, this last iteration really kind of, it really changed the complexion of the program, not just, I think, for the borrowers to some extent, but also for the banks. So it may be a little bit more difficult to find a financial institution that's willing to put the 5-year note on their books.
Okay.
That's a great point. I feel like, and you're dead on. I called these people that were with these bigger banks orphaned. And so, I was orphaned. And so you had to go and try to find an alternative source. So I really think the local banks, the regional banks, came out on top and really have done a great job.
Thanks, Lori.
For the customers. No, I'm really proud of them, and I hope it brings new customers to them.
It's, I think it's interesting. For a long period of time, the value of a banking relationship, for the last 8 or 10 years during a very robust economic recovery and expansion, the value of that commercial banking relationship may have been diminished. But during PPP, wow, it really came to the forefront.
Absolutely.
The community banks
they were
really
there.
stepped up. Yeah, the community banks stepped up. So proud of our industry and proud of the folks in Lexington, not just at Bank of the Bluegrass, obviously, but the other community banks as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, we were, Tom and I were having a discussion, I guess it was last week, and I don't think I spent more than 10 minutes on ours, just that whole time. It was so fast, so easy. I didn't have to call anyone. It was really great. So, and we bank with a community bank, and so I was thoroughly thrilled with that process. So I think you're dead on, Tom.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I think one of the challenges during that process, not to stray from our the questions that we want to answer today, but the technology and moving through that process during COVID, when people were afraid whether they were, they didn't really want to come into the bank. And so a lot of folks did everything electronically, like we used DocuSign for all of our loan documents. I'm sure you did too, if your process took 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that to me was I was really proud of the industry for that as well, is to say, hey, look, we're a community bank, but we also have the technology to be able to close a loan completely, electronically without any paper, which I think was surprising to some folks.
I bet the folks who are thinking about the environment are really happy right now because the banks finally started to do things in an electronic way, and then soon we'll do home closings and things like that too. Yep. All right, so Lori, I think you were going to take the next one. Actually, real quick, I've got one item that has popped up, and then here's a great question. Did PPP expand to 501c6 organizations? And this is from someone I consider a great professional and a colleague. So I'm happy that she brought this question up.
I'm so sorry, but it has not. It is still, the 501c3s can apply, but there's there's nothing yet for the 501c6s.
So
Have we heard anything about that, or is there any latest
I haven't,
news
but
on that?
but I can reach out. I can reach out to my partner group, but it's been a little quiet since the big last piece of information was what Tom covered first, which was the huge change, and there were changes daily, hourly at some points during this, but the big last one is what Tom talked about with going from the 75% to 60% for payroll, et cetera. But yeah, I haven't heard anything, and I honestly haven't seen anything associated with 501c6s.
okay. Well, if you do find out, because I know the person, I would love to know so I can pass it on to her.
Well, and you know what? Give that person my email address, and then we can just talk directly.
Okay. All right. I'll do that.
Great.
Perfect. Well, so as you were talking a little bit about, the electronic, the ability to file electronically and have everything happen like that, tell us a little bit about not only the forgiveness aspects, but also then will the forgiveness forms be electronic as well, to your knowledge, Tom?
That's a great question. And I'd say the answer is it depends. It's like your economics class in college, right? The answer to everything was it depends.
Right.
But ultimately, I think it depends on the financial institution. It's a great segue, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this point. A lot of financial institutions, including Bank of Bluegrass, we are instituting a portal, if you will, which will allow our customers, and again, I know a lot of financial institutions in town are going to do the same thing. We're instituting a portal that will allow our customers to essentially populate the portal with all the documentation that they have. A lot of the information that they would have to fill out on the 3508 is going to be pre-populated in that portal. And so ultimately the burden of applying for forgiveness should be slightly diminished. And I say that, again, I should preface all this by saying Bill mentioned that he applied for and obtained his PPP within a 10-minute period of time. Forgiveness is not going to be quite so easy. Okay. So I know, I know they have a form that they titled 3508EZ, but let's not let that it's not apropos with regard to the 3508 full form. But in terms of the portal and really where banks are today and how the technology is going to work and how you're going to apply, again, it depends on the bank. But I will say this. So the technology partner that we have selected is actually 30% owned by the American Bankers Association. So they have a really good lead on what's happening with the SBA, because the banks have to not only verify the documents that come in, including certification of the application for forgiveness. We've got to verify payroll. There's things we have to do when we receive the application, and then we have to submit that to the SBA for the formal forgiveness. Well, the SBA hasn't stood up their portal yet. So there's no way for any bank right now, today, to take your forgiveness application and then direct that to the SBA for acceptance and forgiveness. So, Lori and I have talked about this, and certainly my advice is not to wait to apply for the sake of waiting by any means. But I would say, patience is probably preferred in this case, especially given the fact that the SBA has not stood up their technology solution to allow us, and us being the banks, to actually submit the application for forgiveness to them. So it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. We have a lot of customers here at the bank that are ready and willing to apply for forgiveness, and they're ready to be at the front of the line, and we're excited for them. And again, we're going to have a portal like many banks where they can organize their documents. We can verify them electronically, and at some point we'll be able to submit that electronically to the SBA, but not yet. The company that we work with has indicated that it will likely be later July.
Okay.
Don't hold me to that. That's what they've indicated, but they said basically sometime between now and July 28th is what they're anticipating for the SBA to stand up their portal and actually allow banks to submit applications that they have verified and gone through the bank process with and for. So, ultimately, the timing of it, I did want to talk about for just a second. So when you submit your forgiveness application to the bank has 60 days to make a decision in terms of verifying that number primarily it's going to be the payroll, and Lori is going to speak to that. But after that 60-day period, within that 60-day period, the bank is going to submit that to the SBA for forgiveness. Then the SBA has 90 days to make their decision whether to forgive the loan or not. That's what we've been told. So you're looking at essentially, a 5-month period of time. Theoretically, hopefully it won't take that long. I would assume that most banks are going to want to pass those applications to the SBA as soon as possible, and the SBA is going to want to approve those and pass that back to the bank as soon as possible. But theoretically, the bank has 60 days to make a decision. The SBA has 90 days to make a decision. And so I wanted to let people know, again, be patient with the process. And by the same token, don't expect it to resolve itself overnight.
Well, so then is there something that says, I guess a couple of things come to mind. I don't know if this is for you, Tom, or you, Lori, but number one, is there a window where you, as the applicant, have a deadline to apply for forgiveness? And then number two, then do you have payments due potentially while it's in the forgiveness portal?
Hey, Tom, that's all you.
Yeah, great questions. 12/31. Actually, it's 12/31, or help me out, Lori. How many weeks after the date of disbursement do they have to apply for forgiveness? I'd have to look that up.
I'd have to look it up too. I know, well, there's the 24-week period, but my date is 12/31.
Right.
Before you move on, what's interesting to me, and I have some clients whose banks have said, late July at the earliest, really expect August before the portal will be up.
Right.
And that's another kudos to these banks is the amount of money and time they're spending to get this process moving. So it's another big change for the banks, and I'm proud of them. And they aren't making a lot of money off these loans anyway. So it's, again, great reason to be with a local bank. But as far as the next piece of that was, so if just think about this, if you get August, if we don't get a portal going until August, and you then need 5 months, right, between filing date and where the SBA will essentially give you a ruling. I'm curious how it's all going to follow through when it comes tax time, because then you just bumped right up to 12/31. That's another issue.
Well, and the other, Debbie, the answer to your question, and although I will say I haven't received, or at least I haven't read specific guidance on this point, payments are not due if you have applied for forgiveness. So theoretically, if you apply in September, your payments are not due. Now, at 1% interest, granted it's an amortizing note, but at 1% interest, the payment, the client isn't going to be harmed typically at 1%. But I wouldn't think, because that's a very below market interest rate.
Right.
Theoretically, you're not due for a payment. They haven't produced specific guidance. So as a banker, we have a note that's on the books, a client's due for a payment. They haven't told us exactly how that deferral process works while the client is waiting for their forgiveness to be processed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's going to be a case by case for each bank to figure out on their own how they're going to do that. I don't know if banks are going to basically modify all the loans, all the PPP loans that they have on their books, which in some cases with some of the local banks is in the thousands. And so again, I hate to say it depends. 12/31, I believe, is the drop dead date to apply for forgiveness. But as far as the process itself and the timing and the payments, some of that guidance we're still waiting on some of that.
Okay.
We have a just for as a matter of logistics, it's almost 4:30, and everyone knows we try to wrap up by about 4:45. One of the other items that we had agreed we're going to talk about are these economic disaster loans. Would you all like to get into that now, or do you want to wait just a few minutes before going over the EIDL?
I think we can get into that now, especially because we're talking about the money that's still available. So you know, you've got what you already did for PPP. If you already did it, then you be patient is the term for going for forgiveness. Do not call your banker every 2 days and ask where it's going. I think they've had it about up to here with that. But I do want to mention something. I did just get into the tax implications, and I think that's really important to note. As far as the forgiveness goes, while the IRS came out in May with a pronouncement. So the gross receipts, and Tom can attest to this. So according to the PPP program, the forgiven receipts are not taxable, right, Tom?
The forgiveness loan proceeds.
Yes, sorry, the forgiveness loan proceeds. Yes, sorry, are not taxable. However, the IRS has come out and said, okay, but the expenses that were forgiven are not deductible. So you end up with the same position where essentially any forgiveness will be in your bottom line. It's really important. Doesn't mean it's not going to change, but it's really important that people know this. So gross receipts aren't taxable, but expenses forgiven are not deductible. I hope that changes. I really do. Okay, so let's talk about, there's a couple other funds, and I think there's a Main Street lending program, but I don't think it's being widely used. And if you have any questions on that, you should get with your banker. But there are still some EIDL funds or some Eidl funds available. And if you've had the PPP and you've utilized all your PPP funds, you can go in and get this Eidl loan, and you can then use it for the same thing you use the PPP funds. For people that got it early on, they couldn't use it for the same thing. But once you've exhausted your PPP, you can go in there. So this is another way if you're struggling with being able to keep your employees on. But keep in mind, it's a loan. It's a loan. This is not forgiven. What's interesting about this loan, now this loan is through the SBA, thank God, because I'm pretty sure no bank would take this deal. It's 3.75% for corporations. Tax exempts are 2.75%. The maturity is up to 30 years. I mean, that's insane. From a business standpoint, it's a little nuts. But pretty sure, Tom, you wouldn't take that deal, would you?
It wouldn't be my first choice.
So now, if there's also the Eidl grant, so these were also available earlier, and this was a grant. So in theory, they call it an advance, but I think it is in theory is a grant, and it's up to $10,000. And again, not taxable or possibly taxable, but don't have to pay it back. And it is $1,000 per employee. So those are still available too, also.
And I was going to add one piece to that, Lori, on the forgiveness application for the PPP. So, Bill, if you're a client who got an Eidl economic injury disaster loan, if you got the grant, the $10,000 grant, and you apply for PPP forgiveness, they're going to deduct that $10,000 from your PPP forgiveness funds.
Okay. Yeah, we did not get a grant. We just did the PPP thing just because it was there. But that's right. That's super handy to know that you get it.
And to be honest, that was if you got your PPP within a very specific period of time, or your grant or advance within a very specific period of time.
Right.
Post, like what we're talking about today, I am unsure if the grant piece needs to be paid back or not. So I don't want to comment on it, but like Tom said, if you got the grant and then you got the PPP, they're basically netting the two together. You can't have them both. But I don't know now if you can have already spent your PPP, and if you go get this grant, if it's also forgiven or not due back. There's some I'm just unsure about that, so I don't want to indicate that that's the case.
Well, that brings me to a question. Outside of the alcohol industry and the pharmaceutical industry, if kids are at home in the fall for school and people have to work from home, companies aren't back doing their things, I don't foresee a lot of businesses tracking back up and being normal again. Right. And even if everyone could go back into an office, there is a ramp up period to get things restarted. Everyone's acknowledged that. Do you think there's going to be a second round of any of this, so that if you got a PPP in one area, or an EIDL or a grant, whatever that might be, that it would extend in if we find ourselves, say mid-fall with no major change?
I think it's very likely, but I mean, you never know. I mean, they've already put a lot of money behind this. Mm-hmm. I need to go back and mention one quick thing on this. On the current funds that are available for EIDL, it's limited. This is the loan. The loan piece is limited to $150,000. So that's not a lot if you're a larger company to get you, for a period, certain period of time. Whether, they keep creating new rounds and new funding, it's possible. I mean, but you're right. You've got to display the need too. That's really important. You can't just go, oh, money's available. I've got $500,000 in my bank account, but I'm going to go get some more. You really need to be able to show that you need the funds. And this is the idea of it, is to be able to stay open and keep your employees on.
Mm-hmm. Tom, have you heard any rumors that are available to share related to that? Because, a huge portion of our economy it is built on jobs that require people to be present to work. So whether it's healthcare or restaurants or manufacturing, there are certain things that just can't be done from home. So I'm curious if you've heard anything or even any rumors in the banking space about any of that.
Yeah, Bill, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, I mean, rumors abound. I wish I had facts. I can tell you this fact. I can tell you this fact is that when you look at GDP, about 68% of GDP is consumer expenditures. People can't spend money that they don't have. Mm-hmm. When you look at our economy and you look at the measure of the production within our economy, all facets of it, and you say 68% is consumer expenditures, and we have, I won't say record unemployment, but unemployment still at a very high number. People have been spending money. As you know, the government has really intervened in this case, more so than at any point in my career. I started in '97. At any point in my career have they done this? Not at any point. I mean, between unemployment and the extra $600 a week that people have received, the stimulus money that they've received, the government's really propped it up thus far, and that would include all of the individuals who are getting money and continue to spend that money, hence the tie to consumer expenditures and GDP. Mm-hmm. The question is, how long can that go? And the other question is, when do we get a vaccine or an effective treatment against COVID that gives people the comfort to go back out, go on vacation, go out to that restaurant, spend your money in the economy. And so essentially without a vaccine, and I wish I knew when that was coming and how effective the efficacy thereof, but without that, we're kind of in this limbo period, and I don't see the government at this point not continuing stimulus. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's back to work funds. I don't know if it's going to be stimulus for folks who earn under $40,000 or $50,000 a year. No one knows what that's going to look like, whether it's going to be a second round of PPP. I don't know. I think it'll be a little bit more surgical from everything that I've heard and read. I think the next government intervention from a financial standpoint will be a little bit more surgical. And so I'm optimistic that they will continue to prop up until we get to a point where we are past COVID. And again, either an effective treatment or vaccine, only because the consumers in the United States carry the day. And I don't know if everyone really understands that. I mean, you think about government spending and all these different components of GDP. At the end of the day, it's us, all of us, spending money in our communities, and that's what drives the community. Mm-hmm. So people have to have that income to spend. If they're not going to get it through unemployment, they're going to have to find some other way to get folks enough money to continue to spend until they feel safe to go out, get a job, and get back to work and get back on with life.
Okay. All right. I think you couldn't have said it better there. Unless people have money to spend, then nothing's going to be purchased. And so the economic stimulus for individuals was only the one-time event. And so that obviously is untenable when so many businesses have had to reduce staff, shut down, et cetera. So hopefully the government will do something to come out and help with that.
I will say this, though, from my perspective, although you hear a lot of bad news, and honestly, I think there will be more troubling financial news going forward. That's why so many banks are. JP Morgan Chase just released their loan loss reserve contribution for the quarter and that sort of thing. And it was a very, very large number, over 10 billion, I believe. Mm-hmm. When you look at it all, the government intervention, I think, ultimately will continue. Because it certainly has to, in order for us to get back to some state of normalcy long term. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Tom. And I think that's encouraging for those of us as small business owners who,
sure.
Have, been able to weather the storm, but still unsure as to what the future holds. Just to kind of, give you guys a chance to share a little bit about each individual organization. Give us a couple minutes before we wrap up of what some specific programs that you guys have been doing to help others or that you're planning on offering in the future. And Lori, I'll start with you on that.
Thanks. What I've been doing actually is a lot of this kind of discussions with my clients. I have small business owners and some 501c3s and people that are being hit hard by this situation. And so I'm having these exact discussions. What are my options? When am I going to do forgiveness? I mean, I'm getting my clients asking me that all the time. But I work primarily, I'm a CFO, and I work as a CFO consultant, outsourced CFO for a variety of companies. And so they don't have anyone in-house. To handle some of this stuff. One of the things Tom and I talked about earlier was that this is sophisticated. While the application wasn't too bad, the forgiveness is hard. So you don't try to, unless you're fairly savvy, use your CPA, use, someone else if you don't have somebody in-house. You want to make sure you're certifying this and doing this right is one recommendation that I have. But, if we can, issue my email address, I'm happy to filter any questions that people have and possibly if you need, guide you in a proper direction or something like that.
I was going to say that'll be because just what was mentioned today with dates and timing and things like that, and knowing that it's going to change, that may be a very beneficial thing to for the people who are on today, and then our entire registrant list to know that that's available.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can't help everyone, but I mean, I can have a few minute conversation, get somebody going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Don't call your banker and ask them when they're going to have stuff ready. My recommendation.
Tom, I'll buy you a beer next time I see you, Lori. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
You need to do, Tom. You need to do what everybody in IT is doing now. And you say, just put a ticket in. We'll get to it.
That's not really our style. But I think the question was, what have we done? What are we doing? And I'd say it this way. A lot of this is just hard work. A lot of it is want to. And at the end of the day, Bank of the Bluegrass is a community bank. The PPP program was for community businesses. If there's no business community and we're a community bank, we don't have a bank at the end of the day. And so, I'm really proud. I can say this is that, 98% plus of the folks, our customers and others who brought in a completed application at the outset of this were funded by Bank of the Bluegrass. And I know in dealing with a lot of folks, and Lori alluded to this earlier, especially folks who worked with larger super regional or national banks, they didn't have that same experience because we got the phone calls when they were put in a queue. To Bill's point, they did get a ticket. They got a number, and no one could tell them anything about where they were in the process or when they were going to get their PPP money, or even if they were going to qualify, really anything. And so, just proud, I guess, of us and the fact that we were able to fund such a high percentage of clients, community businesses that needed help, at that moment in time. And really, as far as helping them going forward, the portal, as Lori alluded to as well, that's not free. We're paying money to access that and give our clients an automated experience as far as the forgiveness goes, so that hopefully they can organize and evaluate in a more kind of pragmatic and sequential or linear manner. We feel like we're giving everyone the best tools possible to maximize their loan forgiveness dollars. And that's the question of the day. How do I maximize my loan forgiveness dollars? Again, the bank is going to be able to answer a number of questions, but most of the community banks in Lexington made a lot of loans. So back to Lori's point, if you have very specific questions, I would consult your CPA or your other trusted financial advisor, because some of the questions, as Bill mentioned, the dates, the timing, some of those questions can get very specific very quickly. In order to maximize the PPP forgiveness, it's probably worth spending some time and money with a financial professional to make sure you maximize your forgiveness dollar amount. So
good advice.
Well, thank you all for today. We're right at the wrap-up period. I will say, from the technology standpoint, one thing that I would encourage everyone here and that watches the video after the fact, make sure any of this financial information that you're sending, whether it be to your bank or to your financial advisor, that you're sending it in a secure manner. I see way too many companies email banking information and other personal information related to payroll and things like that in an unencrypted fashion. So make sure that when you communicate with these people, you are doing it in a very secure way. Thank you all very much for being with us. What we will do, if you do have anything that you want to share, Lori and Tom, we've got a webpage with all the resources from our previous program. This will be posted on YouTube after it's generally takes about 2 hours before it'll be online. And then for our attendees, you're going to get a link back to a survey to let us know what you thought of today and any ideas that you may have for future topics, things that are on your mind that you'd like to know about. That really helps Debbie and I put this program together. So with that being said, thank you all very much. I do appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks. And don't forget, the link that was shared out earlier for the Small Business Awards is in the chat area. So other than that, I hope everybody has a great day. And panelists, you are now free to go back to your day. You may want to mute and turn the video off because it'll be on in here in just a minute. And we've had some funny experiences closing this down.
Thank you very much.
All right. You all have a great day.
Bye,
Thank you all so
everybody.
much. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.